Okay, Jen, we're good to go on this end.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome to the Mtss Charter School Board of Directors meeting for August. Welcome back after that summer that really felt just like a long weekend. I will call us to order at 5:34 p.m. And let's take roll. Karen Harding Davis.
Here.
John King. Tina Lee.
Here.
Dr. Mejorado.
Here.
Preeti.
Here.
Jennifer Morgan, I'm here. Ashante.
Ashante is not going to be joining us today.
Okay, great. Jonathan Core.
Here.
Moving on, hearing of the public for items on the closed session agenda. All right. At this point, we will adjourn to closed session to consider and/or take action upon any of the following: conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. Administrative representatives from Mtss Charter would be Dr. Wood and Anita Schwab. Our agency negotiators, Charlie Leo. I will adjourn our closed session 5:35.
if the student struggles, who do I refer them?
I kind of was pretty cool about it, but I don't,
It's so hard to tell with her though.
I
She just
know.
doesn't.
I'll bring it up to her again tonight and just say, whatever.
Second. Harvard.
Hey, Zeba, I'm here.
Yeah, actually, I have it in my data.
Jen, can you hear us?
Yeah, he doesn't, he said of the 16.
How are you? Nice to see you.
It's all in there.
Zeba, did you just mute your boss?
Can you hear me, Jennifer?
Now I can hear you.
No, I didn't mute my boss.
He was saying that, I mean, it's all.
Yeah. So I guess you get used to that schedule.
Oh my God.
And I'm gonna only keep it over. Like, I was full-time and then I got to my part-time, like, that's still too much. That's still too much. It was my daughter.
Yeah. Are you looking at me? I thought.
And Jennifer, I just put out this on the call now,
How are your eyes doing?
and we have all board members in the room.
Thank you.
It's a journey, let's just say it.
They have 50 seconds,
Yeah.
Okay.
then we're starting.
Right.
Are we getting started?
I'm enjoying it.
I know. I can say. Been much better.
Okay, welcome back to the Natomas Charter School Board of Directors meeting for August. I will reconvene open session at 6:15. There was no action taken during closed session. Moving on, actually, one quick note, Zeba, I don't know if you caught this, but Mr. King has joined us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hearing of the public for items not on the agenda.
No comments submitted via the form.
Okay, hearing of the public for items on the agenda.
Also, no comments received via the form.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda if nobody has any other comments?
I so moved.
Okay, thank you, Marie. All right. Sounds like we have a couple of seconds, so I'll let you adjudicate that, Zeba.
Yep, Preeti's on the second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Karen Harding Davis.
Here.
Sean King.
Here.
Gina Lee.
Here.
Dr. Mejorado.
Aye. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I
Sleeping.
Okay. Preeti.
Aye.
Jennifer Morgan, I'm a yes. And Ashanti is absent. Okay.
And Sean King. We need Sean King's vote.
Sean King.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
you.
All right, moving on, we have some consent items. May I have a motion to approve the consent items, approve personnel changes, our June 14th and June 22nd board meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I will take a roll call vote. I will start with myself. I'm a yes. Preeti.
Yes.
Dr. Mejorado.
Yes.
Gina Lee.
Yes.
Sean King.
Yes.
Karen Harding Davis.
Yes.
Okay, moving right along. Action items. We have the student and parent handbooks from Dr. Ellis.
Hello.
come to the table.
Come to the table.
She's learning our new protocol.
I am coming to the table. Hello, everyone. Yes, the parent-student handbooks, every year we make sure that the parent-student handbooks are updated with all the latest any type of policy changes, as well as giving information to our parents and families and students on our expectations for the year. So what we've done this year is, thank you to Ms. Hone for helping me get everything consolidated and ready to go for you. And our recommendation of the staff is that they're approved so that we can get them out to families for the new school year. Are there any questions?
I went through, now that my son's gonna attend PFA, it was a great reason to go through it with a fine tooth comb.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just, under general policies on page 18, I noticed it said children need to be, page 18, need to be picked up by 4:15.
Yes.
And I heard in the orientation today that we're supposed to pick up our kid by 4. So whatever the consistent time is, 4, 4:15, that was one. I noticed the same thing in leading edge, because when I went through PFA, I thought, well, let me see about leading edge. So that was.
Clarification?
Hmm?
May I offer clarification?
Yes,
on
yeah,
that?
please.
So the time they have to be picked up, the last time is 4:15.
Oh, okay.
But we want parents to pick them up by 4 o'clock so that they're not bumped up against that final
Oh, okay, okay.
timeline, but that's why.
Oh,
there
that's
was-
right. You tell us to pick them up by 4. Got it.
Correct.
Got it.
4:15 is also when we no longer have staff on campus.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, that's great. That's good for me to know. Let's see, the other thing, we heard about the new WIN program,
Yes.
what I need, but I didn't see it at all in the PFAA handbooks. I don't know if you feel you need to add it or not, but it's a cool thing, a
Yes.
cool new thing you're added. So that was one thing that I noticed. What was, on the leading edge, on page 11, there's an athletic policy, but there was no mention or listing of what sports. And I don't know if that's even necessary, but again, I just thought, that would have been interesting to see what sports leading edge offers. That was on page 11, I think.
May I offer clarification on that as well?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so with the athletic program, Mr. Shane is still working through with all of the COVID changes and changing to our new sports league, making sure that everything is consistent. So it will be updated on the website, but we didn't put it in the handbook.
Good.
And also the goal of the handbooks is that they live that we don't have to change them every year.
Right.
So we want to make sure that the most recent information is on the website.
Got it. Cool. I was very impressed with the idea of having, to learn about the home hospital access program. That's great. I had no idea that existed. The guest passes to bring non-NCS students to the dances. I told my son, okay, you gotta get a preferred name policy. Those were just cool things that I was pleased to see that in the handbook. Well done. I was just those little pieces there that I thought, well, let me find out.
And Addie and the principals and Ziva as well. We try to make these documents reflective of what we see each year. So like the preferred name policy, right? That was something that came up like 4 or 5 years ago. We're like, okay, we should add some language in our handbook about that. Also, in the handbook, there's a little statement around short-term independent study versus quarantine/isolation intent study. So obviously that second paragraph is a new addition for this school year. So we try to, as Addie said, make them sort of living documents, but at the same time reflective of what's been actually happening.
Absolutely. No, they're very well done. I was very pleased to read through all that.
It was a labor of love. Are there additional questions? Okay. Is Ms. Jennifer still there?
I am here. If there are no further questions, I would ask for a motion to approve the 2021-22 student and parent handbooks.
I so move.
Thank you,
I'll
Maria.
second. And I'll
Karen?
second, yeah.
And while we're at it, I'll do a roll call vote. Karen Harding Davis,
Yes.
Sean King,
Yes.
Gina Lee,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Preeti,
Yes, please.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. All right, moving on.
Before we move on, it's really cold in this room. Can I go back to my computer or you need me?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Approved board policy 6158.1, short-term independent study. Laura.
I'll step up to the table.
Approach the table.
Get on screen. Okay, so we had to make some adjustments to our independent study policies because of Ed Code 51747. And so we worked with our lawyers to make sure that everything was up to date and current. There were 5 basic changes that were made. The first is that we had to have stated in our documents that that we were to hold a meeting to see if independent study was the appropriate educational option for students. And that's not something that we had in the language before, but that is often a part of the process anyway. And then with that, we had to add to the policy that one way to determine if it is still the best option is that students need to complete a minimum of 10 assignments within 20 school days. So that's the longest that they can go between their meetings with their supervising teacher. So they have to do at least 10 assignments in 20 days. And if they're not completing them that, then we would need to talk about if it's the appropriate thing. The other thing is that, we needed to add in that we would be following our MTSS, our local tier system of support process with the students, making sure that they're taking assessments and looking at their learning progress to ensure that they are making adequate progress through the independent study model. So that's a part of evaluating it. With that comes that we had to add in the tiered re-engagement process that was developed last year through our distance learning process and through independent study. And so that is, just ensuring that students are engaged and they're not just kind of floating off into the ether. And so some changes that the state made as far as requirements were that we are to require live instruction for students that are in independent study. So for students kindergarten through 3rd grade, it's a daily requirement of live instruction, and for students 4th through 12th, it's weekly live instruction. In addition to that, we need to provide daily live interaction for our independent study students. And so that can be a check-in with their supervising teacher to see how it's going, making sure that they're not getting lost in between the meeting dates. Let's see, we also added in a statement that the students have access to all the coursework that is available for their grade level at Natomas Charter School, ensuring that it's equitable access. And then if the family requests it, or if we find through another means that we are required to have a meeting about transitioning the child back to a site-based program, if one of the members of the SST team deems that it's not the best placement. So those are just some requirements. A lot of those things we already had in place. The only one that is really different are the specifying the 10 assignments completed within 20 days, and then the daily check-ins, and then the live instruction for independent studies. So both TAC and VLA have those pieces as a part of their regular process. And then our short-term independent study for site-based students, we've got that process in place for that as well. Any questions?
Yeah. I read where you had, if a student wanted or a family wanted the child to come back to a campus, that, if there's room, fine. If there's no room, then there was some language in there about looking for other places they go in temporarily that they would explore, or we would help them with that?
So
how does that function?
in that transition meeting, we would look at what are the options.
Okay.
Is the family interested in going back to their neighborhood school?
Okay.
Is the family interested in looking for, a different type of program? what, you know, are there openings at our site-based programs at that grade level? So we would have that discussion. Ultimately, it is the parents' responsibility to enroll their student into another school. And so in that meeting, we would talk with them about all of the different options within their, where they're living and what's available to them.
Any other questions? Okay, may I have a motion to approve board policy 6158.1?
I motion to approve policy 6158.1.
Thanks, Preeti.
You're welcome.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Karen,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Preeti,
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. All right, moving on. Let's see. Oh, Laura, please stay at the table.
Okay, policy number 2.
Yep,
Oh.
board policy 6158.2, course-based
That's right.
independent study for VLA.
Okay, so all of the same changes were made for the course-based one as well. And then we did have, this is why I bring them. And then we did have, oh no, that's the resolution. Yes, all of the same changes were made for the students, because it's the same whether they're in the course-based or not. So the main difference there is that the virtual academy is run on the course-based system, where instead of reporting and turning in all assignments to one supervising teacher, they're turning in their assignments and gating their attendance through the individual courses. So working through their subject area teachers, and so it changes how the attendance is organized in the documents. But they have all of the same requirements as far as like having the live daily and, you know,
Weekly.
weekly, because there's no kindergarten through 3rd grade there.
Right.
So weekly live instruction, which VLA already has their workshops, so they're way above and beyond with that, and then having that daily check-in available to them as well. So they have that with their supervising teacher and or grade level teachers.
Okay, any questions? All right, may I have a motion to approve 6158.2?
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Starting with me, I say yes. Preeti,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes.
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Okay. Laura, you may depart the table.
There's not another one?
Nope.
No, next one's
Let
mine.
me get to.
All
Now,
right, so-
Dr. Wood, stay at the table. Approve board policy 0.
So the third policy for this evening is an updated version of our board policy 0470, which is our COVID health and safety policy. So last school year, actually the same month last school year, you all adopted a COVID-19 health and safety policy. This is basically just an updated version of that policy that's been updated with the latest public health requirements. In a nutshell, I was sort of joking with the team, but really what this policy says is that we will follow the California Department of Public Health and Centers for Disease Control's latest guidance, which we do certainly through like our weekly communications and things that are going out to families, but we actually have a COVID-19 response plan that's on our website at natomascharter.org/coronavirus. So the idea is that this is the policy that sort of backs up that plan. In a traditional school district, you might see a board policy and administrative regulations. This is the board policy that goes with those regulations that are in our COVID-19 response policy.
All right, any questions on board policy 0470?
I do just want to state for the record that thank you to Dr. Mejorado. She found a typo under section 2 for that COVID policy, which I have since made the edit, and it will be the edited version, which is just a formatting issue, will be posted on the website tomorrow morning.
Awesome, thank you, Ziba. And thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
Joe, are you gonna have more to tell us about COVID later on in the meeting, or can I?
Yes, we cannot have a board meeting without a COVID update. So you will get one in a few minutes, I promise.
I'm so relieved. Thank you. I know that we're all eagerly awaiting that, so let's quickly approve this board policy. May I have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote, Karen Harding Davis,
Yes.
Sean King,
Yes.
Gina Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Maria Mejorado,
Yes.
Preeti Merchant,
Yes.
and Jennifer Morgan, I'm a yes. All right. Budget update, Anita.
Thanks. And Siva's going to put this up on the screen for me. And my update today is going to be short and sweet so that you can get to your COVID updates. I know how anxious you are with that. But over the summer in July, it was one of our Friday messages to the board. We had given you a update, which is technically like a 45-day revision that school districts have, although it's not required for school districts. And at that time, what was on the May revise that we had used to prepare our adopted budget really didn't change from what the state did. But there was so much in there. So I just wanted to kind of follow up and give you some updates on the additional information that came out on there. So we'll wait for Siva to
Sorry.
Cool.
Yeah, okay, so on there, so the governor did sign an on-time budget. And so, as I mentioned before, let's see, 19,
Is that where you want?
yeah, the second, okay, sorry, thought it would be full screen. Anyway, so there was, everything pretty much stayed the same from the May revise with a little bit of tweaks, but the main things that relate to us is the 5.07 cost of living adjustment, as well as special ed getting a 4.05% cost of living adjustment. And then also the contributions that go to the public schools system stabilization account, which is kind of like the rainy day fund for school districts, as well as the state's rainy day fund. But the large priorities that actually made it in the adopted budget was the big ticket item, $11 billion to eliminate those inter-year principal apportionment cash deferrals. So that was huge. Also $3.2 billion for the cost of living adjustment, and $1.1 billion for the concentration grant increase, which is huge, and that will affect future budgets because this is an ongoing adjustment. So for those schools that have 50% or more free and reduced or unduplicated pupil count percentage, they are going to be getting these large increases to their concentration grant money. That's an ongoing increase that is will hit the education budget. It's not too. So that was a pretty big thing. Also, 1.8 billion for the expanded learning time, and then it's the second wave that we're mentioning on here. So last year we got about 50% of funds for the expanded learning opportunities grant that and the in-person learning grant that we have in our budget when we talked about and we did a plan for. Now there's supposed to be a second wave of information. Again, the most money going out first, over $1,000 per pupil for those schools that have a unduplicated pupil count of 80% or more. And then if there's any leftover money, and so all schools will get a share based on their unduplicated count. But the minimum is set at 50,000. So each school at least will get 50,000. And that's an additional wave that we're going to be getting there. And then also the universal transition kindergarten that we're going to have here. And then also the universal meal program. So those were the main big ticket items in the state's budget. So next slide really tells us.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Regarding the transitional kindergarten, so how are we gonna do that actually?
That's a great question. We haven't decided yet. So what we're actually kind of doing is waiting to figure out, there's actually a whole conversation going on about cleanup legislation about this legislation that was passed. So seeing kind of how that sorts out. But one of the questions I know I have is, we already have a transitional kindergarten classroom. Are we in compliance with the new law, or like, do we need to have more classrooms, right? I think we actually are in compliance with the law, but a question that we'll have to figure out is like, we have 5, if you will, kindergarten classrooms, right? Because we have a transitional kindergarten and 4 kindergartens. If we were, let's say, gonna do 2 transitional kindergartens, that means we have 3 kindergarten classrooms, which actually means that like 60 of those kids are gonna start in TK, and there's not a whole lot more room to add more kids in.
Right.
So effectively what it's doing is making Star Academy have like a whole nother grade level. And it would be a little bit like if you didn't get into TK, you didn't get in at all.
Right.
And over time, you know, over a number of years, it's going to be that the child's birth date will eventually not matter, right? If you want your kid to go into TK at that age, they can. But for the next few years, the birth date is gonna matter, and it's only changing by a couple of months. So I know one of the things that we were sort of like, let's just get school started and then we'll kind of figure this out. But we're gonna have to think through, like, do we wanna just stay with our 1 TK classroom until it gets broadened out to all of the birth dates? Because otherwise what we will do is potentially end up with a really skewed cohort of kids that are very old for their age, right? Because they're coming in on the older. And we actually, for a little while, that was happening at Star Academy, where there were 2 TK classes that automatically rolled up into 2 kindergarten classes, and it created some uniqueness when those students then came onto this campus, because they were older than a lot of their peers.
That's why I was curious if we're adding more classes.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so what does it mean for us here? So basically, our adopted budget numbers changed slightly from the update in July because it came out with a new calculator by $6,800 on there. So our average increase over the prior year, we're getting $458.49 per ADA, which is a lot of money. So next slide. Ziba, you go here. So just comparing 2021 to 21-22, you can see our budget is now at $18 million, which is a $1.8 million change or 11% increase from prior year's budget. And part of our adopted budget planning was to use that money for CalPERS and CalSTRS pension increases, our step and level adjustments, increases to the salary schedules, ongoing additional positions, increases to our inclusion education. Addie's not here, but
formerly known as special education.
Formerly special, and then also some facility planning costs as well. And next slide. So what also other budget considerations that were in there is that now we know that the SELPA gave me an estimate for our special education growth funds or inclusion funds. And when Joe goes to the meeting, the steering meeting on the 19th of this month, hopefully they'll be saying that they're going to give us $157,110 additional in funds. Also, when the budget was adopted at the last minute, our unemployment rate went down a little bit. So we were planning for a huge increase. It was a 0.05% for years and years. It went up to a 1.23%, which was a lot of money for us and stuff. They adjusted it down to 0.5% now. So that saved us almost $100,000, so $90,509. Independent study, which you already approved today, there a lot of permanent changes going on with some big ticket audit items or penalties that come with it for noncompliance. We're getting a more education effectiveness block grant again. So that will come with a plan that you'll have to approve later on in the year. And it's a 3-year grant, just like the other one that we had, one-time funds in nature. For kitchen infrastructure, all schools are getting it if you have a campus with a kitchen. So it's one-time funds of $25,000. And in talking to the food service director at Natomas Unified, they have plans for additional lines and things like that to use the money. So we will work with them on that since it's their program that serves us and stuff. The Universal Meals Program, they're also have some ideas on how to address the 2 meals per day starting in 2022-23. So students, we have to offer 2 different types of meals, and they can't just take 2 lunches or whatever. It has to be a lunch and a breakfast. So how to get those to our other campuses and stuff. Food service department is working on that. And then your universal transitional kindergarten, we will be getting $100,000 minimum for planning grants. So as Joe just mentioned earlier, we pretty much have a program in place. So that money can be used to really analyze what we can do with that expansion and see if we have to tweak things. See the next. Okay, and then the exciting thing in this budget that I love is the cash deferral. So we are getting 100% of our funds during this current year, and also all the deferred funds from last year that were going to be paid through between August and November of this year are now going to be paid in this month in August. So that's huge. And that is close to $4 million for us with all of the deferrals. And then see that on there. So basically then you'll, when we come back in December, you'll get a budget update for 2021, which will include these changes that we just talked about, as well as enrollment updates. We really do need to check on our non-classroom-based programs, see if the projected increases are panning out, as well as new hire position control changes and newly identified needs. Carryover budgets will be in there, and then any additional information that comes out from the state. I'll open it up for some questions. That's it.
That $100,000 for the transitional kindergarten, is there any flexibility, like how would that be used? And can you use it for different things?
It's supposed to be for planning purposes
Just planning,
only, okay. And then they haven't come out with the trailer bills on the guidelines for those acceptable uses yet.
We're envisioning, you know, our very loose initial conversations are like, might be curriculum materials, might be looking at professional development. The individuals that are in TK classrooms are supposed to have an early childhood education. It's like a supplemental credential sort of situation now. We've been fine with that with the individuals that we have, but if we were, let's say, going to add a second TK classroom, we might be looking at helping someone make sure that they have that as well. And then it kind of fits into that facilities conversation, you know, that we've been talking about too, about, you know, if we want to expand, like we're going to need more classrooms, right? Either, you know, especially if we are trying to expand beyond the 5 classrooms that we currently have for kindergarten and transitional kindergarten.
There is a facilities, TK facilities grant that you have to apply for it for assistance in that too. But really, you would use your planning dollars to decide if you would go for those. Okay. It's competitive.
Yeah.
It's really sort of an interesting time that this came into the budget when it did, because what we're seeing is that actually statewide kindergarten enrollment shrinking pretty precipitously. And, you know, the question is like, is that part of COVID? Is it, and kindergarten's not required, right? And so, you know, I think this is part of that. I think the legislature kind of has to come back to this a little bit and like, do we want to make TK and kindergarten like a universal requirement? Not just that the schools are offering it, but that the expectation is that all students are coming into those grade levels. And then, you know, here in Natomas, we do still have increasing enrollment, right? Because we have the whole North Lake area getting developed and that sort of thing. So we're a little different than the rest of the state, but, you know, making sure that we have students that are coming into those classrooms as well.
I think we have a lot of, I mean, not, and everybody probably does, but we have a lot of younger families too, and of course younger kids.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a big difference.
All right. Any other budget questions for?
Or sure, Steele.
Yeah, now more COVID. Yeah. You might actually did you hit refresh? I don't know if that's been up for a while. I fixed one little typo that I found in it. This is the refresh button on your browser, and then it should fix the typo.
Does that look right?
Yeah, it's good. And then just present. I do have animation, so you'll have to click. Sorry. I was thinking I was clicking. Present in the upper right corner next to the share button.
Oh, that's
All right, so I was bound to determine that we were not going to do a COVID-19 update today. So we're talking about launching into our new school year with a tiny little bit of COVID update inside it. So Ziba, you can go and click to the next slide. So first thing is just kind of a quick little update regarding summer school. So as you can see up there on the slide, we had a couple different summer school programs going on. We had our elementary programming, which we had this Nights Quest virtual summer school program that was available to everyone. But we also offered an in-person boost program. And as you can see on the slide, there were about 50 students in K-5 that participated in that program. And it was built around STEAM or STEM activities, creative writing activities. They were doing plays, hands-on learning. So you can see a couple of pictures there of some of the STEAM activities that they were doing over at Star Academy. Here on this campus, we also had a secondary summer school program. So the middle school program was really focused on building connections and kind of helping students that had been kind of disconnected during the school year get reconnected, getting ready to come back to school in the fall. We had about 65 students participate in that. And then our high school program was really focused on helping everyone get caught up. So like if they didn't have passing classes so that they could get sort of back on track to graduate. So we actually had 92 students, so that's 9th through 12th grade, who remediated one or more courses during our summer school program. So this is actually huge because realize, at least in the 10 years that I worked at Natoma Church, we have not had a summer school program. So this was sort of our first version of the summer school program. Definitely we will be building it again next year. I think the thing that we're also trying to look at as we think about next year is, this year's summer school program was really focused on supporting kids that had maybe kind of fallen behind. And we've been able to do a lot of that work. We're still gonna have opportunities for students to catch up during the school year. I know the credit recovery program that we use is through BYU, and we'll be signing a new MOU for that so that students can take some of those classes during the school year. But what we're also trying to think a little bit about for next school year is like, are there opportunities if kids want to accelerate or get ahead, and kind of thinking a little bit about that, especially as, we were talking about this as a team the other day, that really there's kind of this expectation now that students are going to complete a CTE pathway. They're also going to take college classes and have some dual enrollment opportunities and take 4 years of a world language so they can earn the seal of biliteracy. As we were talking about, we're like, how does that all actually fit in a 4-year schedule? And starting to kind of think through like, okay, if the state has these sort of new, if not requirements, strong encouragements for our high school students, how do we think about either in one sense, in some of these cases, starting to leverage middle school a little bit as an opportunity? Maybe they can start taking those world languages earlier. But also if they want to take a class during the summer, or they want to take a class during sort of like an intercession period and get ahead, what are some opportunities that we can provide for them? So this is an update on summer school. So our theme for this year is about reconnection. And when we talk about reconnection, we talk about our all staff day. It was really about 3 things: this idea of building belonging, reconnecting to our mission and our vision, and really coaching students to lead the future. So you can go to the next slide. So we have building belonging, and this idea that we're going to really intentionally start the beginning of this year about how do we build relationships with each other. If you are a parent at the Natoma Charter School, you probably are not going to see your kids immediately jumping into academic activities on day 1. The teachers are really going to take the first 8 days of the school year to really focus on how are we building relationships with each other and with our students and with our families. And then next slide, please. And then also, what we talked a lot about is now's a really great time to look back at who we are as we plan for the future. This is actually Natoma Charter School's 29th year of operations. Next year will be our 30th. So we're always trying to think about like what a 30th anniversary celebration, something like that looks. But what we actually spent part of our first day back as a staff on Thursday doing is actually looking at the original 1993 charter and kind of talking through what does that document say about who we are and where we should be going. And what the staff really talked about is it's about a humanistic approach to education, a whole child approach, really connecting with each and every student, that the activities that we're providing kids to do are really purposeful and authentic and grounded in being prepared to positively shape this indeterminate future. So that actually takes us to the last kind of theme, which is about really coaching our students to lead the future. And what we talked about at our all staff day is that the students that are currently in our classrooms are likely to be the parents of the individuals that will be coming into the 22nd century. And so these individuals that we have in our classrooms right now, these are the ones that are going to go out, and whether we're talking about climate change, or we're talking about a global pandemic, or we're talking about addressing systemic racism or gender inequality, these are really the individuals that are going to be leading this work. To a certain degree, we're all a little too old. And so where are we really giving them meaningful opportunities to really engage and be problem solvers? And as a staff, we talked about how, as we all know, last school year, we had the crop top protest, right? And as a group of adults, we're a little irritated, right? Because it's like, we worked so hard to get everyone back to campus and like, we're upset about the dress code. But then, as we reflected on that, we actually said, but this is actually really powerful, because what it says is that we have a group of students that are really interested in changing the world and reshaping policies. And so we started thinking about like, okay, so how do we do that? Whether it's, a PFA through the arts, or whether it's leading edge through project-based learning, or Star Academy, like when they're doing their writing activities, that they're writing for an authentic purpose. Maybe it's their ideas for how we can help with homelessness, or how we can help with climate change, whatever that issue might be. And so really this idea that we have to coach the kids that are in our classrooms to lead the future. We're very much dependent on them to do that. And where are we giving them authentic opportunities to do that? So it's kind of our big overarching umbrella of reconnection. Next slide. So in terms of things that we have on the horizon for this year, all of our students in our site-based programs are going to be back on campus, and we are very excited about that. I have to say, I feel like I need to knock on 4 pieces of wood. I was pretty apprehensive that we would have a lot of families wanting to actually pull their kids out, concerned about the Delta variant or other things. But we're really not seeing that. We've had a handful of families that are switching programs, but the vast majority of our families and students are very excited to be back on campus. And even at PAC and BLA, we're actually hearing about students excited to be for in-person workshops. And so we're working on building those. So next one. SCAPE, which is our our before and after school program at Star Academy, will be returning to full operations. PAC, where we have in-person workshops coming back. We're also doing some virtual workshops, but we have in-person workshops. Leading edge sports are back, so we're excited to have that. At PFAA, we have our productions coming back. And what I've been telling everyone, that we're going to be doing a production here in Nintendo Charter School as long as Broadway Sacramento is open. If Broadway Sacramento is open, we're still open. We're not going to do anything different. We're also going to be digging deep into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So we started that last year. We actually have a staff and parent group, and with some students on it as well, that are sort of our advisory panel. And then they worked with an outside facilitator named Mariana Sousa, and she's actually working with our staff over the course of 4 staff development days this year. So we're going to be digging into that. And then we have our $150,000 MTSS grant that Addie had talked about a few months ago. So we're launching into that, and that actually gives us 2 coaches from the Sacramento County Office of Education that are coming out and working with our administrative team and working with our teachers. And really what it's focused on is what are our MTSS processes and procedures. We're trying to really build a model program. The reason why we received this funding is it's really the state saying we want to be able to have model schools that we can point other school districts or charter schools to. And so we're going to take these people that are pretty far on the journey and really coach them up to be even stronger. So we have that piece going on. We have our 3rd year of inclusive education, formerly known as special education. The reason why we are kind of changing that nomenclature is, special education, just by its very wording, makes it sound like there's this thing that you're going to go to, right? That you're going to go get fixed in this other room or something like that. Whereas really the whole idea behind special education is that we're providing students the supports they need in the least restrictive environment, really trying to have an inclusive approach to it. So that's why we're kind of rebranding that a little bit. We also have our charter renewal coming up this year. And there was some question with the legislature and the way that they wrote the trailer bill this year. We automatically got a 2-year extension on our charter. And so the question was, well, do we still move forward with a renewal? And we'll talk about it at a future board meeting, but really talking to our legal counsel and also talking to the school district, we feel it's really an appropriate time to still move forward with our charter renewal. We're ready. We should be able to renew at that 7-year renewal level. We have all of the data in place, and we did a really robust process last year for collecting data to be prepared for it. And then we're also going to be talking about a facilities master plan this year. So this idea of, what land do we need to acquire, buildings do we need to build, in order to really continue to serve our students well over the next 5 to 10 years. So these are kind of our big things, but that's not to say that COVID hasn't gone away. It's still unfortunately here. This is actually a quote that I originally got from Addie. It was from an MTSS conference that she went to, but it actually comes from a young adult novel called Kafka on the Shore. But it's this idea that, and once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, You won't be the same person who walked in, and that's what the storm is all about. And so as a staff, we talked about how really in many ways COVID has been that storm. We're still in it. It's still kind of raining, don't put your umbrellas away yet. But we all recognize that we are very different individuals than we were 18 months ago. Our organization is different. Our relationships with Natomas Unified and with the other charter schools and with Sacramento County Public Health, very different. I mean, I joked with the staff that I wasn't even sure how you got a hold of the public health department 18 months ago, and now we're like on speed dial with each other. So, things are different, but different in a good way. It's actually made us stronger in that way. So moving on to the next slide. So yeah, COVID isn't going away quite yet. It's gonna go away one day, but we're not quite there. So you can see from this graph that we are, here in Sacramento County, we are back up to sort of like January, February level of COVID transmission rates. There are some pieces that are different, so if you just keep clicking, there's gonna be some slides. So the latest information that we have from public health is we do have increasing cases. We have, but it's largely in our unvaccinated populations. I have some data here, I'm sure in a second. We are seeing some breakthrough cases, and really hospitalizations are of unvaccinated folks at this moment. So as a result, this is why the county's asking for universal indoor masking. It's really an opportunity to try to put some brakes on what's happening here in the county. They're also going to continue encouraging vaccinations like we've been doing. And in terms of some data that I thought was really interesting that was shared with us is, so this is the month of July here in Sacramento County. In Sacramento County, there were just under 9,000 positive cases of COVID-19 in the county. Of those almost 9,000 cases, 84% were from unvaccinated individuals and 16% were from vaccinated individuals. So it's really showing that there are breakthrough cases. Now, one way that you might look at that data is you might go, okay, so I have a 16% chance of getting COVID if I'm vaccinated. Not really, because really the 16%, so it was about 1,500 individuals, they actually represented less than 1% of the entire vaccinated population in Sacramento County. So it still is largely the unvaccinated coming through. And then also recognize that of those 1,500-ish people that were breakthrough cases, 3.5% of them had symptoms. Everyone else was asymptomatic. So also why the universal masking is so important right now, because even for those individuals that are fully vaccinated, if they have it, it sounds like they very likely will not know that they have it. So then moving on to that, so 91% of our current hospitalizations are unvaccinated individuals. So if you go back to that slide one second. Oh, actually just keep it. So I mean, really what it kind of says is it's why we're going to continue talking about vaccinations and why we're going to continue talking about masking. So in terms of our approach to COVID this year, it's really coming down to 4 areas. First, having a huge dose of humility, right? This whole thing is much larger than each of us. The guidance will change probably 50,000 times. So just keep going back to natomascharter.org/coronavirus to see what the latest information is. But we each have to do what we can to really stop the spread and try to get us back to some sort of sense of normal. It's really about community. We all want school to go back to as normal as possible. We also want our community to remain open and for our campuses to remain open. And as an organization, we're going to take the necessary precautions to make sure that happens. We're also going to treat each other with kindness. It's really important for us to recognize that we have individuals on our campus that are like, I'm ready to roll. I went to a sleepaway camp this summer. I visited Florida on vacation. I got COVID. I've got my COVID protocols down, right? And I'm ready to be back. And then we have other people that honestly haven't left their house. And so everyone is kind of on their own journey back to this reality. And we have to be prepared for all of that as a school community and kind of accept people where they're at. But ultimately, we're going to kind of move forward with conviction. So we're going to continue to follow the public health guidance. I know outside of our lovely Natomas Charter School island of excellence, there's all these conversations about masks and vaccines. We're just following the guidance. And it'll change, it'll adapt, but we're just going to continue to follow the guidance. And we're here to model for our students what it really looks like to navigate a really challenging time. We talked about as a staff that in a weird way, we all kind of feel like this pandemic feels like a dress rehearsal for something else. Not sure what the something else is, but whether we're talking about climate change or other things, it's a really important opportunity to model for our children how we come together, how we really work through this, how we each might have to make sacrifices, but we do that because it's for the greater good.
This is beautiful, Joe. Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Very touching. Yeah, I mean, I could almost cry looking at how you're coaching this. Yeah.
I mean, to a certain degree, I hear what you're saying, because to me, this doesn't seem really hard.
Yeah.
You know, I look at COVID really through the lens of my son more than anything else, right? Like I mentioned, I mean, I really do feel like this is a dress rehearsal for something else. And right now, we're not doing such a good job as a society, right? And so where is this an opportunity for us as the adults to really help these kids get prepared for this? You know, I think I'm 44. I've never really lived through anything as dramatic as this before, right? I know my grandparents did when they lived through like a war and that sort of stuff, but that seems like the only thing that even feels somewhat analogous to this moment, right? So how do we, going back to the idea of belonging, how do we really, you know, cultivate that the kids can have strong relationships with each other and that, you know, we're doing meaningful work, but we're doing it because they have to be ready to take on this world that we're going to be handing. So in terms of this is what Jennifer was asking about a little bit earlier, the actual procedures that we have going on. So these are the public health procedures. So in terms of face coverings have to be worn by all indoors. You can kind of go through these a little bit. Outdoors are optional. Universal face coverings meant that we can have less physical distancing. So the reason we're able to have everyone back on campus is because everyone's wearing a mask. Our lunch procedures are going to primarily be outdoors. We're still going to have the plexiglass barriers at Star Academy because that's a completely unvaccinated population. We still are going to have on-campus testing. It actually resumed last week for staff and it's resuming this week for students. We're doing it at least twice per week on the Blackrock, so once on the Blackrock campus, once on the Star Academy campus. And talking to Christy London, our school nurse, if we need to add, you know, if we have like a lot of people showing up, then we'll just add days. You know, we can kind of figure that out. The testing is provided at no cost. In terms of vaccination records, we are in the process of collecting those from both staff members and from students. And really the number one reason right now is honestly for contact tracing purposes. I'll kind of talk about that in a second, but we need to have this information. In terms of quarantine protocols, they're very different than last year. And in a future slide, there's a little graphic that'll kind of explain this a little better. But realize if an individual is fully vaccinated and they're exposed, as long as they remain asymptomatic, they can continue coming to school. There's no restrictions on their attendance. If they are unvaccinated, but the exposure happened when they were wearing masks, and both individuals have to be wearing masks, for students, they can remain at school, but there's an asterisk next to that. And that's that the parents have to agree to testing twice during the quarantine period. So for instance, right now we have a group of students that have to quarantine that are not vaccinated. In order to stay at school this week, they're gonna have to take a test on Tuesday and they're gonna have to take a test on Thursday. And they have to be negative both times in order to remain at school. If the situation was unvaccinated without masks, everyone's going home for 10 days. So what is kind of interesting to me is, you know, you hear all this stuff on the news about this state's not allowing masks and politics aside, they're not going to be able to keep their school open because really the masking is what's allowing us to make schools somewhat functional. If we had a policy where it was like, whoever wants to wear their mask, can wear their mask. Well, the moment one of those kids is positive, everyone around them is going home regardless of whether or not they were wearing masks. So that whole idea of, I operate with the mindset that first and foremost, after health and safety, we're just trying to keep things as consistent as possible. And those masks are really important to that. In terms of campus closures, there are no plans for campus closures at the moment. One thing Sacramento County Public Health has talked about is that they're not thinking about like reduced capacity in businesses or closing anything at this point. The only thing that might change that is if they start seeing significant numbers of vaccinated folks in the hospital with severe complications. That would be the point at which they're like, okay, something has changed about this virus and we need to rethink our approach. But for right now, there's no plans on closing campuses and it'll really be about keeping them open. Sports, music, and theater. At this point, we're still officially awaiting new California Department of Public Health guidance. So we're just working off last year's protocols. We're starting all of our music programs like last year ended, starting all of our theater programs like last year ended. This little graphic that's kind of hard to see on the screen is a decision tree. I'm actually going to walk up and kind of walk through it. You got it. So click on the spacebar once again. So when you look at this decision tree, this is about whether or not someone has to quarantine. And there's basically 3 questions that get asked now. Is the individual fully vaccinated? Was the individual masked during the exposure? And is the individual asymptomatic? So if the person's vaccinated and they're asymptomatic, they're just staying at school. That's for students and for staff. If the situation, students only, everyone was wearing masks, the students can stay at school. If though, let's say we had an unvaccinated staff member who was exposed, but that staff member was wearing a mask, they actually cannot remain at school. They are gonna go home for 10 days. And then the asymptomatic part. So click the slide one more time. So as a board, you are aware that we had our first case of the school year. And obviously can't, for health reasons, can't go too deep into the details. But here's the thing I think it's important for everyone in our community to understand. In the case of this particular case, we had a group of staff that were exposed and we had a group of students that were exposed. So in the group of staff that were exposed, 100% of those individuals were fully vaccinated and 100% of those individuals remain asymptomatic. That's important because that means 100% of those individuals can continue to be at school. If we had individuals in that group that were not vaccinated, those individuals, we'd be trying to figure out substitute teachers for those individuals for the first week of school. In our student population, realize these were 8th graders. So these are some of our youngest students in terms of being able to be vaccinated. Actually, 72% of them were fully vaccinated. And there's a couple more students that are in the process of being vaccinated. They had like their first dose, but they didn't have their second dose. And so also in this situation, we had 100% masking going on. So the group of staff and students were doing a really great job of following the protocols. And the families of the unvaccinated or not yet fully vaccinated students did agree to testing for the 2 times that we need to. So what does this mean? It means that the original individual who tested positive, that individual is at home and we're supporting that individual in terms of a sub and all that sort of stuff. But it actually meant that everyone else can come back to school, which is huge because realize 6 months ago, this was not the case. 6 months ago, all of these individuals would have been going home and we would have been scrambling to find substitute teachers and all that sorts of thing. So I cannot underscore the importance of vaccinations and universal masking for this school year for keeping our campuses as, if you will, normal as possible. As we saw in that earlier data from the public health department, the vaccinations and the masking definitely help with overall infection rates, but it also is going to actually be what keeps the school functioning as normal this year. And finally, from a financial standpoint, every time we are looking at an individual quarantining and needing to find a substitute for that individual, it is over $200 per day for the substitute. So if we're looking at 10 quarantine days, it's $2,000. And at 1 or 2, it's not a big deal, but over time that can add up pretty significantly. So then the last area to update was independent study. So tonight you adopted 2 board policies related to independent study. And the reason why is the legislature passed AB 130, and that basically got rid of distance learning and replaced it with, I'll call it new and improved independent study. Or I call it enhanced independent study, I guess. Independent study must be offered by every school district in California this year. It is optional for charter schools. So Westlake and MP3, for instance, are not offering long-term independent study. In Natomas, we're the only charter school that will be, and that's because we have our existing PACT and BLA programs. One thing that's different that Laura was talking about is there's a supervising teacher that has to do daily check-ins for the K-3 students or weekly check-ins for the students. There's also, so long-term independent study, think about that as PACT or BLA. Those are families that don't want their children to come back to campus, right? We also are offering short-term independent studies. So the idea behind short-term independent studies is probably up to about 14 days per school year. You would be doing this if an individual needed to quarantine or they had a medical reason, or they were we're gonna go on this trip and it's a pre-identified absence. Next bullet, please. Oh, well, so long-term IS, we have the daily check-in with the teacher, the staff member. We have the tiered re-engagement process that Laura talked about. So the idea is that, let's say we have a student at PACT or VLA who's falling behind. We have a new process of checking in with them to make sure, trying to figure out what's going on exactly. And then that plan for returning to in-person instruction if we're finding that independent study is not working. Next slide. And just a few reminders about independent study, it's always an alternative placement. So what is a little wacky about this year is, so let's say my child, little Michael Wood, is exposed or has COVID symptoms or something like that and has to quarantine. The school has to ask his parents if he would like to go on independent study, and they have to sign a master agreement. And so it is going to be a little, I think, more bumpy in terms of transitions than we were able to do last year. Last year it was like, oh, okay, you're not feeling it, no problem, we'll see you on Zoom tomorrow. And that's not what we're gonna be able to do this year, at least with the way the law is currently written. There's some talk about some cleanup legislation, but we'll see what happens with that. We have to have the board policies, the master agreements, and then we have to be collecting student work samples. The master agreements have to be signed by parents, teachers, and students. I know it's always a little weird, especially for the parents of the younger students. Why is my child signing this? They can barely read this. It's what the law requires. And then as a charter school, well, currently only 20% of our students can be enrolled in independent study. And that really is technically the long-term independent study and the short-term independent study. But the state doesn't really have a mechanism of tracking our short-term independent study kids. So it ends up really being who's in our long-term independent study programs. And realize 20% is basically where we're at with PAC and BLA being full. So even if we had 100 student families over at STAR that wanted a separate independent study program there, we actually don't currently have the capacity to even offer that to them. That could change, we'll see. So in terms of our plans for the year, long-term independent study is gonna be a PAC and BLA. Short-term independent study will be through our 3 site-based programs. And then it's gonna primarily be packet-based. So the idea is that, if a student has to be out for a period of time, the teachers are gonna generate a packet of work. We have our teachers on special assignment that are gonna be the supervising teachers. And so they'll be able to provide office hours after school for any of the students that are on independent study. If we start seeing significant, let's say this doesn't happen, but we had a lot of kids all having to quarantine simultaneously, then we might have to adjust this a little bit. But we're gonna be kind of figuring this out. And then, there's one more thing. So just in terms of looking ahead, possible cleanup legislation that might change some of the stuff around independent study, and then having to adjust based on quarantine numbers. So with that, any questions I can answer as we jump into a new and exciting school year?
As far as COVID, with lunch, last year I know we were checking in to see who you're eating lunch with. Is that something that you're gonna?
So we're not bringing that back this year, partially because we found in every case that we contact trace that the kids hadn't filled out the form. So some kids are really great about filling out the form and some weren't. And to a certain degree, it didn't matter because with middle and high school students, they can tell you who they ate lunch with yesterday, right? Like, oh, I ate lunch with so-and-so and so-and-so type thing. So we're not gonna have the check-in form necessarily, but but the same idea. Also, we're really gonna be pushing get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated, especially on this campus. Because with the exception of 6th grade, they're all age eligible. We're in the process of collecting vaccination records right now. But we've now had 2 populations. So this group of 8th graders I talked about, and then the students who went to prom. So this group of 8th graders were about 72% fully vaccinated, and prom was 80% fully vaccinated. So as we've probably received about 400 to 500 vaccination records already from families for about 950 students on this campus. So, we're going to continue to solicit those, but we're hoping we have really high vaccination rates, which will help with that as well.
So when it's raining and then the kids need to come inside and eat, what about that?
We have not completely figured that part out yet. But I would say realize that on a typical rainy day on this campus, for the most part, kids are still eating outside. So they're eating under the awning, whether it's the big awning over here next to the multipurpose room, or they're eating under some of the hallway awnings. What we're thinking about doing is in the cafeteria, having tables set up with the doors open to allow for good cross ventilation. Also probably having certain classrooms that they can eat in. But definitely in those moments, the kids are gonna have to shift to a procedure of when you're indoors of you take your mask off to put in a bite of food and then you put your mask right back on. And so I think one of the things I am a little curious to see starting on Wednesday is to what degree our students are still wearing masks outdoors. Officially the policy is you don't have to wear your mask outdoors, right? That's from the CDPH guidelines. But today I was watching the kids that came on campus and none of them were taking their masks off. They all were fully masked. So I think we have a student population that is yeah, I got a lot of us, we got our shots and we're good, but we're still we're still very COVID safe, So we're gonna kind of see how that goes. And then, we have a few months probably until the rain will begin. But it gives us an opportunity to revisit our protocols a little bit.
But he's gonna be on STAR Academy campus.
So-
The little one. lunch?
Yeah, so STAR, we're keeping the lunch procedures the same in the sense that it's all largely outdoors with the plexiglass tables, or plexiglass barriers. We do have a set of tables inside the cafeteria, but it's on that corner where all the garage doors can open up, so it's basically outside, yeah. And yeah, we'll kind of have to see what that.
They'll be like, oh, optional math
Yeah, hopefully not, hopefully.
outside when recess.
I know the teachers are gonna work on some protocols of like showing, well, first we're gonna start with, just keep your mask on, it's really not that hard. But then if you do need to take your mask off, like putting it on your arm as like a bracelet so you don't lose it.
That's what I do.
Yeah, so we're not like having to find masks every 5 minutes. But then we'll have extra masks over at Star Academy. Like everything else with COVID, we'll kind of have to take it a day at a time and adjust, you know, based on what happens. But so far, I mean, we've had the skate kids over there. I mean, skate reopened June 2020.
They did.
And, knock on wood, we've not had any transmission in that population. And we've had some positive cases. But I will say that the kids have done a really great job of always wearing their masks, so.
Washing hands and stuff, I think that was the key. Are they, so with recess and stuff, are they doing multi-classes or like grade level classes?
There's grade level areas. And so, and then the teachers we're going back to win time where like the classes are gonna trade students for win time. So the teachers are working on seating charts for all of those different transitions, so we can do that for contact tracing. But once again, if everyone wears their mask properly, and the families agree to twice weekly testing, which we can have over there, the students can stay.
Right.
And so I think that's gonna be the biggest thing that we're gonna have to help families really understand this year is this is really important, along with the testing, in order for your kid to continue to stay at school. And fortunately, based on last year, we didn't have a whole lot of pushback on wearing masks or that sort of thing. The kids were very much bought into it along with their families. And the feedback from families so far has largely been, especially from Star Academy. Thank you for following the protocols.
Absolutely.
Hey, Joe, quick question. You showed on one of your slides, and I think it was just for the exposure, but you said 100% fully vaccinated staff. Was that just for the leading edge exposure?
That was just for that particular exposure that we had, yes. We're actually in the process of collecting vaccination records from our employees. Last year, a lot of our employees had to come through us to get signed up at the Natomas Unified Vaccination Clinic. Yep. As a result of that, my guess is that we're probably at about a 95% vaccination rate amongst our employees. But it's one of the reasons why we're collecting the records right now is we're trying to assess that and figure out what we need to do to address that moving forward.
Okay, so that will inform, I would imagine that would inform our policy and decision on any vaccine requirements for staff. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons, aside from the health and safety reasons, the other reason why we're collecting this information is that we believe it's probably imminent that there will be a state or local requirement for K-12 educators to be fully vaccinated or have regular testing or something like that going on. And so one of the pieces that we're trying to kind of pull together is, how much of our population is that really gonna impact? And if so, what can we do to mitigate that impact? Could we offer a vaccination clinic on campus, or can we offer, Dr. Kasiri from the public health department to come, talk to our staff about it? Or, because we're gonna have, I'm making up a number here, 15 staff members that are gonna test regularly, making sure that we have the testing resources for them. But we're not alone. Natomas Unified is in the process of adopting a new policy along with the charter schools here in Natomas as well. And we're all kind of in that same boat of trying to assess where we're at on the vaccination journey to then figure out what's the best policy that makes sense for our organization.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm really excited about the beginning of school, not going right into materials and, the curriculum and reconnecting. I think I am so happy to hear that. It's so important, and it's really going to help, build our community back better, or whatever you want to say. But yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that.
All right, anything else? All right, well, thank you. Hopefully we won't have a COVID update every month. That's the goal this year.
Joe, do you have any executive director comments?
Just a reminder, school starts Wednesday. Keep an eye out for upcoming events, things like back to school night and other things. They're in kind of the weekly update to the board. And don't forget that our next meeting is Monday, September 13th.
Excellent. Board of Director comments.
Bravo.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes, you guys have been through
Yes.
so much, and I can just feel the energy and positive attitude, and looking at this the way you're looking at it. Yeah, it's just awesome.
It is. Ditto.
Good luck on Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome.
It'll be great.
It's
Kids are gonna be
great.
so happy.
I mean, today we had, ninth grade orientation, and then we had, basically everyone except for sixth graders come pick up their schedules, and it was so great. The kids were so excited to see each other, and they were doing a better job than the adults at living life, but following the protocols at the same time. So they
They need it.
They really needed it, and tomorrow all the sixth graders will be coming for sixth grade orientation. So that'll be fun as well. And also tomorrow's Meet the Teacher at Star Academy. So families and students will be coming on campus to meet the teachers. So we're trying to, we have all the COVID things in place, but trying to keep it as normal as possible as you will. Because we think it's really important for our whole community to be able to come back together.
And I have a lot of faith in these kids, to lead us in the future, because I've listened to some of the conversations up close, and it just blows you away how amazing they are.
Oh,
Yeah, so.
very sobering.
Yeah, I know, and I'm glad that you're going to be working with them to direct those passions in a positive way, on things that are important to all of us.
Yes.
All right.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Any future board agenda items?
I have one, Jennifer. Yeah, I wanted to, and I'm not sure how to approach this, but, and I've shared this with you, Joe, before, and I talked to Amanda about it, but I'm not sure where to go with this, but I am concerned about the lack of bridge between Leading Edge and PFA. I'm well aware of this because my son went to Leading Edge and finished the 6th, 7th, 8th, and I remember starting at 6th grade, he was beginning to tell me how a lot of his classmates were putting down PFA, that they didn't feel that connection, that they weren't going to go to PFA since 6th grade. And time went on, and I think, and like I said, I shared this with Joe, that we've lost a lot of good students. A lot of boys, a lot of males, because I understand PFA has kind of more women, more girls, as my son reported to me today. He doesn't appreciate that yet, but he mentioned, yeah, there aren't that many. There's more girls than boys. That's a problem. And a lot of students of color, and some that I know. And again, I just think, I'm not sure if Leading Edge was supposed to have a pipeline to PFAA. But if not, I think that's something that I'd like us as a board to look at and to put on the agenda to take a look at that, maybe put together a committee to see how we can make that bridge. And it's real interesting this summer how I have come across parents that I know, parents that I don't know, that talked about them wanting their children from Leading Edge to come to PFAA. But, the kids, following, the sports is one, but the parent not even being able to come back to the child and say, well, you could do digital kind of graphics at PFAA. And so the lack of information from parents as well. So I really think that for me, from what I've seen, it's something that I think would benefit everybody if we could figure out a way, and maybe we can talk about that, to address this issue. Because I think there's a hemorrhage, they're leaving, and they're not staying here. And I'd like to see that looked at, and to see, with the teacher, with the staff, and with some parents, and maybe some students, and look at how we can do that. Try to mend that, if that's what we want. I mean, I don't know what the model was, but I would like some attention addressed to that.
I think so a little historical context.
Yeah.
I don't think the intention was ever for Leading Edge to be sort of a pipeline to PFA.
Okay.
But I know the part that you brought up to me that I've observed as a parent
Yes,
that I
yes.
find very concerning
Yes,
is this idea that as soon as sixth grade, the kids are dividing themselves.
right.
And one is better than the
Right.
other, and that's not okay.
Right.
You know, especially when we know as parents
Right.
that they're both great programs.
Right.
And we need our middle school to really come together,
Yes.
not separate.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I do want you to know that I've actually already brought this up to both VASA and SEMA. And one of the things that they're starting to think about is like, well, how do we start with the adults? How do we get the adults collaborating more? Because if the adults are collaborating more, then there's some natural bridges to how we get the kids to collaborate more. So I think first and foremost, you know, there are some leading edge students that have no desire to go to PFA. Great, we're here to help you be prepared. And if you want to go to Indercom or St. Francis or Jesuit, wherever that might be, awesome. But then we also have other students like, you know, you were mentioning your son, that we want to make sure that they feel that that's a great place to go, and it's a bridge, and it's my passion, and I can feel strong about that decision that I'm making. And so we are starting to think about it. But I love your idea of like also kind of bringing together kind of a little subcommittee of maybe a couple board members, also maybe some parents and some staff and some students, kind of talk through, like, we have our perceptions of what we think might be causing it, but they probably have some ideas that we haven't thought of either.
And then some ideas in terms of how we can start introducing the leading edge students to what PFA has to offer. Because I think there's a lot more there academically that people don't hear about. You know, if you're not into dance music, there's a lot more, like the digital stuff and the theater, the crafts and all that business with the stage crafts, you know. People need to know what's available. And anyway, so that'd be great. I would like to.
If I may,
Yes.
I came back just to say, if I may,
Okay.
that you're looking at the full program, so also looking at VLA, because PFA isn't our only
Yes.
high school option, and so both the connection with the middle schoolers and giving them that
Yes.
opportunity to be connected,
Yes.
but also looking at VLA
Yes.
as another option, and being able to directly expose all of our students to the programs that we have.
Exactly. You know, because VLA, a lot of students don't know that. I mean, you do come to campus sometimes. I mean,
a lot of time, actually, yeah.
I go back to my computer
great.
outside.
Thank you, Douglas.
So funny. I actually got a lot of questions about PFA too. And people are like, oh, it's performing art. I'm like, no, you can go there. You don't have to be in the arts program, et cetera. You know, there's other opportunities there. And so I always tell people to look into the program. And see if it's a good fit for their children.
One thing that we have kind of going on that we're gonna be building off of next year is, well, this year too. So at Leading Edge, Vassal will talk in probably a few months about, their theme is about the Return of the Knights, I think is it?
Legendary Knights.
Legendary Knights, which is really about tapping into alumni of the program. Similarly, Karen Pollard, so the theater drama lead at PFA, has really been working through social media on connecting with students about how has theater or the arts as a whole really shaped you. And what's interesting is all of the students, I mean, they wrote back some amazing things, but none of them said, I got a job on Broadway. They all said things like, you know, I'm in medical school right now, and having been in a theater program in high school has helped me have more empathy for my patients and really take their perspective and understand. And so having our parents understand, your kid's not going to PFA to become an artist. I mean, they might, and that's awesome. But really what they're doing is they're going to PFA to develop an artistic perspective that might bring them these other things that come with it. You know, whether it's a better understanding of unique cultures, or the ability to take a perspective, or the ability to really learn another language. Like musical notes is a complete other language, right? And so helping families understand it, because I do think in our community, things are too easily labeled. Like, we can use that project-based learning sports thing, right? And PFA is where all the artists go type thing. And it's like, not quite, right? You know, or VLA is for those kids that don't really want to go to school. That's not true. You know, they're coming 4 days a week. So it's helping, it's part of our marketing and outreach a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. We need to do more in that.
I think it's a lot has to do with education between the two academies, or all the academies actually, you know. educating the kids, the students, of course the parents, but the students as well, understanding what each program is and that it's not, you can assimilate and work together.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also would strongly suggest that we need to give kids like at Leading Edge or opportunities to interact and engage with PFA students, you know, and get some exposure to what PFA offers while they're at middle school. And I think it needs to start in the 6th grade because they start talking. I was shocked when I first heard that already students, you know, but they need the experience, experiences, little, whatever kind of experiences they can get that PFA or however they could offer to get them not only to hear and understand it, but to experience what it's like.
Maybe through the web program, you know, that might be a good.
So, Maria, thank you for bringing
Yes,
up this topic. And so I think what we will do is we'll formally agendize probably like a work session or something like that, where as a board, we can kind of talk through this a little bit and like, and with Vasa and Seema and Kevin, you know, thinking about kind of our secondary administrative team, about where we want to go with that idea, how we bring the kids together and their families.
Thank you. I think doing outreach and showing the majors that kids are having and at the university and what universities they're getting into, as well as what they're majoring in, is good. And I love the alumni legendaries. I think that PFA, like all the schools, should do something like that. Because I remember when I was looking at 6th grade for PFA, I looked, it was deep in the website somewhere, but I did see a list of the previous year and the universities, but I think that should be more front and center and just be like out there, easy to see, and like for the community to and just help. I think that will say a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That parent was asking for that, and you send me. I thought she kept them at PFA. You know, so I mean, I think that works.
Yeah,
that works. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. If that's everything, I believe we can adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jen.
Thanks, everyone. Adjourning at 7:33. See ya.
Bye.